The Milwaukee Bucks have officially been eliminated from the playoffs, and I think this has been one of the most upsetting and shocking playoff upsets that I've ever seen in my entire life in any sport, let alone basketball. To be such a dominant one seed throughout the entire regular season, to have arguably the best player in basketball on your team, Defensive Player of the Year candidate in Brook Lopez, and another all defensive team first team guard in Drew Holiday, and to still lose in only 5 games to an 8-seeded Miami Heat team that's missing Tyler Hero and is pretty thin off the bench with guys like Hayward Highsmith getting legitimate minutes in a playoff series is just like absolutely shocking. And I think this one, we got to give flowers to Jimmy Butler, who probably had the best individual playoff series that I've ever seen, I think. And for a lot of people to do was absolutely elite, and you can't stress how good he was. Guy averaged 37.6 rebounds, 5 assists with 1.8, so I'm going to round that up to 2 steals, shooting 60% from the field and 44% from deep on 5 attempts a game, while being guarded by Drew Holiday pretty much the whole series. It's just so crazy to think about that this guy just hits like such a different gear come playoff time, and that he's able to constantly ramp it up year after year and put this team on his back and be that superstar that we all know he can be. But just seeing him do it on such a high level against such high level teams consistently is really shocking to me always, and just speaks to how amazing the player Jimmy Butler is. Of course, I think we have to get this out of the way. Yes, Giannis was hurt, but he played the last 2 games, had good games, and the Bucks still lost both times by giving up really big leads come fourth. In game 4, the Bucks shot only 33% from the field in the fourth and were minus 16. The Heat shot 72% in the fourth quarter in game 4 against this Milwaukee Bucks defense, which is supposed to be one of the best defenses in the entire league. And they dropped 41 points on them in 12 minutes. Like, that's just unacceptable for a team that's touted on their defense, for a team that's meant to be this defensive juggernaut with 3 DOPOY candidate players and multiple all defensive first team players. To allow that to happen is just ridiculous. And I think this falls a lot on Coach Bud not being able to adjust or put Giannis on Jimmy or double Jimmy or do anything to give Jimmy more trouble and more to think about. He just didn't do anything. And in game 5, the Bucks were absolute garbage in the fourth quarter again. They only shot 16% from the field in the fourth. How do you shoot 16% from the field in a must-win game? I don't know. I think we all know the Bucks half-court offense isn't very good, but that's just like absolutely atrocious to shoot 16% in a clutch game 5 where you're up already and you just blow the lead is ridiculous. Meanwhile, the Heat shot 45%, but they scored 32 points in that same amount of time, plus 16. And then you go to overtime, where it was a much more defensive focused, grinded out game. Both teams didn't shoot well, but the Heat were just still the better team offensively and defensively. I think also we saw coaching played a massive role in this series, with Coach Bud just not being able to adjust, not changing the matchups, letting Jimmy go one-on-one with Drew Holiday pretty much the whole series just did not work. And we saw that did not work, especially in these last 2 games where Jimmy was absolutely nuclear. Also, I think most of the time NBA fans do this whole thing where it's like, oh, does coaching really matter? How much does coaching matter? Blah, blah, blah. It's all about the players at the end of the day. And in the regular season, totally agree. I think coaching matters a lot less come the regular season, just because there's less time to adjust, there's less time to game plan. You kind of just have to put in a system, and that system has to work or fail, and that comes down to the players. But in the playoffs, man, are we really going to do this? Of course coaching matters. Every single year come playoff time, we see that best coaches, even if they don't have the best team, can get so much more out of their roster than slightly worse coaches. And I think this, and honestly, the last final series against the Warriors and the Celtics are absolute prime examples of why coaching matters. Eric Spoelstra just took advantage of Coach Bud's lack of adjustments, lack of really changing anything, and was constantly creative, changing things around, using Bam as a ball handler in the fourth quarter to drag Brook Lopez out of the paint, to just open up Jimmy kind of attacking when there's no one else, especially when Drew Holiday's on him. He's just too little for him. It was absolute genius and was one of the main reasons why the Heat won. I just think it's really silly to be like coaching doesn't matter when we see time after time the best coaches win come playoff time, not just due to their talent on the roster, but to their ability to adjust, change their game plan, throw different looks at their opponents just to confuse them, and we saw that in this series. Moving forward for the Bucks, I don't know what happens, man. I think this is just such a disappointing loss that you can't just act like nothing happened and move on with the same roster. I think there needs to be serious changes. Brook Lopez is a free agent. Chris Middleton has a player option. A bunch of guys off their bench are free agents, including Joe Ingles, who was pretty solid for them. And this is just a giant question mark for them come the offseason time. What do they do? Do they trade these guys? Do they re-sign all of these guys? They don't really have any draft picks to move. They're pretty locked into their money. They're going to be, if they re-sign Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton hops into his player option, they're going to be back into luxury tax for the 4th year in a row. Ownership just sold. So what is the new ownership like? I think there's just so many questions around this team coming into this offseason, especially after such a disappointing loss. Like, I don't know what happens, but I think they need some pretty solid changes. At least they need to change out Coach Bud, because I think he's shown time and time again that he's just not a good playoff coach. Like, yeah, I know he won the championship, but like, how much does that have to do with him or Giannis just being like an absolute beast and being like the best player in basketball? If I wonder if he doesn't have Giannis, how much worse does Coach Bud's coaching career look without a player like that guy to just put him on his back and carry him? For the Miami Heat, like, this is such a impressive win. It's only the 6th time in history of the league that an 8th seed has beat the 1 seed, and it's the first time in the best of 7 series that an 8th seed has beat the 1 seed in 5 games. The Miami Heat came out, they worked so very hard. Jimmy Butler was absolutely elite. They were super hot from 3, shooting 45% from deep throughout the whole series. And they were just, they definitely were not the better team on paper, but they clearly just wanted it more. They had more adjustability, more options to throw at the Bucks despite their limited roster, especially off the bench with such little size. Coach Bud and the Bucks just simply weren't able to take advantage. It should have been a pretty easy series. I mean, yeah, you can say Giannis got hurt and that kind of changed the whole landscape, but once again, like, he played 2 full games. They lost both of them. They won 1 game without him. On paper, this is a team that should be able to beat this Miami Heat team, Like, I don't really care. I don't think there's any excuse. I appreciate and I respect Giannis kind of going to the podium and not being like super down on himself and super negative about himself, because I don't think that helps anyone or helps himself. Like, I don't think he should go up there and be like, yeah, that was a total failure and I feel like a shitty person, or I feel like a failure, because that's like deductive and doesn't help anyone. But this season was definitely a failure. So many people had these guys as the championship favorite. They were the 1 seed, goddammit, and they lost like in the first round. That's unacceptable. And yeah, I'm just really interested to see where this Bucks teams go. I'm rooting for the Miami Heat next series. That series is going to be an absolute just grind them out, battling on the paint, battling in the post type of series. And I really hope Randall can be fully healthy for that, because I think that could be one of the best, series that we see this playoffs. And I'm really excited for that. But yeah, take it easy.